Hello everybody, and welcome back to Great Woman History. Today I will be discussing Mary Shelley. Mary Shelley was born in 1797 to Mary Wollstonecraft and William Godwin. Her birth name was Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin. She was Mary Wollstonecraft's second child, the first being Fanny Imlay. She was William Godwin's first child. Mary Wollstonecraft died shortly after Mary's birth, and William Godwin remarried. William Godwin's second wife was Mary Jane Clairmont. Clairmont herself already had two children, Charles and Claire. Together, Godwin and Clairmont would have a child named William. This family of 7 was not particularly happy. Many of Godwin's friends disliked Clairmont. Clairmont disliked Fanny and Mary and strongly preferred her own children. Despite Clairmont's favoritism of Claire, Mary and Claire would become close friends. While Clairmont made sure that her daughter Claire was sent to boarding school, Mary's education was much less formal, though still quite thorough. Mary studied in her father's library and read a great many books, including Godwin's memoirs of her mother. Godwin also entertained many intellectuals of the day. In 1812, Godwin sent Mary to Scotland. There she stayed with Godwin's acquaintance William Baxter. Baxter had 4 daughters, which Mary spent time with. Mary also began writing during this time. She only spent a few months in Scotland, but she would return the following year. Either in between Mary's 2 visits to Scotland or after the second visit, depending on which source you read, Mary met Percy Shelley. Percy was a radical and prominent poet. While Percy was married when he met Mary, he was estranged from his wife. Percy was also estranged from his aristocratic family. Percy wanted to use his family's money to support lower-income families. He became friends with William Godwin and promised to bail him out of debt. This was ultimately impossible since Percy's familial estrangement prevented him from accessing his family's money. When Percy finally came clean, Godwin felt betrayed, and the friendship that developed over their shared political beliefs came to an end. By this point, though, Percy's attention transferred from Godwin to Mary. Mary and Percy began regularly meeting in secret in the graveyard of St. Pancras churchyard, specifically by the grave of Mary's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. They would declare their love for each other and became intimate. Many believe that they first became intimate at the graveyard, which is not creepy at all. When Mary's father, William Godwin, learned of the relationship, he strongly disapproved, because, well, of course he did. Percy was already married. His wife was pregnant with his child. Percy lied to Godwin about being able to pay off the latter's debts. So basically, by this point, Godwin saw Percy as a lying scumbag who had stolen his daughter's honor, which, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Mary and Percy then decided to run away together. They took Mary's stepsister Claire, who may have also been involved with Percy, with them. They did not take Percy's wife, though. They arrived in France and then traveled to Switzerland. It was not a long trip, however. When they returned to England, the damage was done. Mary was pregnant with Percy's child. Godwin would not take Mary back. Mary had to move in with Claire. Additionally, Percy frequently had to leave to flee creditors. And of course, Percy's wife had just given birth to his child, which just made Mary feel worse. And if that wasn't enough, Percy and Claire were probably in a relationship as well. On top of all of that, Mary gave birth to her daughter 2 months early and the baby died. So to summarize, this was not the best time of Mary's life. 1816 would be a very intense year for Mary. In early 1816, Mary gave birth to a second child. Claire also became involved with Lord Byron. After Claire became pregnant with Byron's child, Mary, Percy, Claire, and Byron spent the summer in Switzerland. I'll go into some detail about that in a minute. In late 1816, Mary's older sister Fanny committed suicide. Historians still aren't completely sure why, but there are some theories. Some believe that Fanny was increasingly torn between her stepfather and her half-sister. Some believe Fanny was in love with Percy. Some believe Fanny may have simply suffered from depression, like many people do. Also, in later 1816, Percy's wife also committed suicide, which freed up Percy to marry Mary. Now back to Switzerland. One night, while Mary, Percy, Claire, and Byron were in Switzerland, they were reading ghost stories to each other. Byron thought it would be fun if everybody wrote their own ghost story. It was this challenge that caused Mary to do what she is most famous for. She began writing Frankenstein, which, yeah, that's not a ghost story, but it still fits within the horror genre. As I mentioned earlier, Percy suddenly found himself legally able to marry in December of 1816. Percy and Mary promptly did so on December 30th, 1816. At the time, Mary was pregnant for a 3rd time. She would later give birth to a girl named Clara. In 1818, Mary published Frankenstein. However, she did so anonymously, and since Percy wrote the preface, many assumed he wrote the book. She would later write several other books, such as Matilda and Valperga. The Shelleys were living in Italy when both of their children died. Then Mary gave birth to a fourth child in 1820. Don't worry, this one, named Percy Florence Shelley, would actually live to adulthood. During their stay in Italy, Percy took up sailing. One day in 1822, while sailing, he encountered bad weather. His body washed ashore a few days later. So it now occurs to me that I may have just glossed over something kind of important. Percy Shelley died in 1822. Okay, good. Alright. So now Mary was a still rather young widow. She briefly moved back in with her father and tried to support herself and her son through writing. Percy Shelley's father also granted them a small annual allowance in order to help raise Percy Shelley's son. Beginning in 1839, Mary would suffer from headaches and occasional paralysis. This made it difficult for her to read or write. On February 1, 1851, Mary Shelley died from a brain tumor. She was 53 years old. She was survived by her son Percy and his wife Jane. And that concludes the 8th episode of Great Woman History. Come back next time to learn about Emmeline Pankhurst. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe. If there is any particular woman that you would like for me to do an episode on, then please mention her in the comments below. Thank you.